There are moments that split your life into before and after. Mine happened at a wedding reception, in front of 200 guests, on a 10-foot screen hanging above the head table at the Whitfield Estate in Franklin, Tennessee. 5 words, bold white letters. One at a time, like a countdown nobody warned me about. Dropout, divorced, broke, alone, infertile. The room laughed. Not the nervous kind, the real kind. The kind that rolls through a crowd when everyone decides at once that it's safe to find something funny. My father laughed first, the unguarded kind that tells you he thought it before someone else said it. My mother swirled her wine and watched the room the way she always watched rooms, measuring, scoring, deciding who was responding correctly. And my sister Melissa, the bride, the woman whose name was on the invitations and whose face was on every flower arrangement and whose happiness was supposedly the entire point of the evening, she leaned into the microphone and said that maybe everyone shouldn't laugh too hard because her older sister might actually cry. I didn't cry. I picked up my phone under the table, typed one word to the man standing quietly at the AV booth in the back corner of the room, pressed send. 3 seconds passed. The projector went dark. And what happened in the next 20 minutes didn't just ruin the reception, it dismantled 16 years of carefully constructed lies, and the family reputation that had been built on top of every single one of them. Brick by expensive brick. My name is Nora Callahan. I am 32 years old. I am an investigative journalist. And this is the story of how my family's cruelest moment became the most expensive mistake they ever made. Before I go any further, if those first few sentences already hit something in your chest, please take a second to hit like and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I read every single one, and knowing you're out there means everything to me. Okay? Let me take you back to where this actually started. The invitation arrived on a Wednesday in early September, wedged between a utility bill and a press credential renewal form I had been deliberately ignoring for 2 weeks. Cream envelope, heavy paper stock, my name in calligraphy on the front, almost right. They had written Nora, with an H. That one unnecessary extra letter told me everything I needed to know about the level of care that had gone into addressing it, which is to say, none. You don't misspell the name of someone you think about regularly. You misspell the name of someone you remember only when you need something from them. Inside, a formal invitation to the wedding of Melissa Ann Callahan and Brandon Ellis Whitfield. Ceremony at 4. Reception to follow at the Whitfield estate. No +1, no table number. Just a handwritten note at the bottom in Melissa's looping script that said Dad thought I should come, and that it would be nice if I tried not to make things difficult. I set it on my kitchen table in Nashville, next to a cold coffee and a draft article I had been reworking for 3 days, and I stared at it the way you stare at something you already know is going to cost you. Here's what you need to understand about my family, because without this, the rest of the story doesn't make full sense. My father, Gerald Callahan, built a real estate development company in Franklin, Tennessee, starting with a single commercial property he bought at 31 and expanding steadily outward for 3 decades until the Callahan name carried the particular weight that comes from being in the same town long enough for people to stop questioning what you're worth and just accept it as a fact of the landscape. Gerald coached youth baseball and sat on the Chamber of Commerce board and shook every hand at every ribbon cutting and made sure the newspaper photographer was always somewhere nearby when he did. He was the kind of man who understood that reputation is infrastructure. You build it quietly and consistently, and then you live off it for years. My mother, Patrice, was the social architecture behind all of it. She knew which families mattered and which were on their way up or down, hosted dinner parties with the kind of effortless grace that takes enormous hidden effort, and had spent her entire adult life managing the story of what the Callahan family was. She was exceptionally good at it. The performance never slipped, not in public, not even in private, not even when it should have. Melissa was their masterpiece. 2 years younger than me, naturally charming in the way certain people are charming. Not because they try hard, but because they have spent their whole lives surrounded by people who respond well to them, which trains a person into a kind of ease that looks like a personality, but is really just a very comfortable habit. She moved through rooms the way good weather moves through an open window. People just felt better when she showed up. And then there was me, the one who asked questions nobody had asked to be asked, the one who noticed things at the dinner table that everyone had agreed not to notice, the one who, at 17 years old, refused to sign a document my father slid across the kitchen table one October evening, a deed transfer for 4 acres of land my grandmother had legally signed over to me the year before, on my 16th birthday. Rolling grass, a small creek, one old oak tree that had been on that property longer than anyone alive could remember. My grandmother Ruth told me when she gave it to me, "This land is yours, Nora, whatever happens. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." My father wanted that land for a development project called Oakdale. He needed every parcel in the area consolidated under his company's name. Mine sat at the center of the map like a missing piece he couldn't get around. He explained the situation to me the way Gerald Callahan explained most things, not as a request, but as an arrangement that had already been decided, and my role was simply to make it official. I said no. 3 days later, the university registrar's office sent a letter notifying me that my tuition fund had been closed. The account Gerald had been building since I was a child, gone. 1 week after that, he stood in the foyer of our house in Franklin and told me that a daughter who couldn't respect her family's decisions didn't have a place under her family's roof. Melissa was at the top of the stairs watching. She was 14 years old. She didn't say a word. I left with $61 in one bag. That night, Gerald told the neighbors I had dropped out, run off, broken my mother's heart. In a town where the Callahan name meant something, his version was the only one that traveled. So when the invitation arrived 15 years later, my name misspelled. No guest, a note telling me not to make things difficult. I almost threw it in the trash. Then Gerald called. The warm voice. The practiced one. The one he used when he needed something and wanted to disguise the need as an act of generosity. He said my grandmother had been asking for me, that she was scheduled for hip replacement surgery in 3 weeks, that at 82 there were always risks with surgery, and that she had been very specific about wanting to see me before it happened. He said he would arrange a visit to the care facility where she lived, but that it would mean a great deal to the whole family if I came to the wedding first. Gerald Callahan had been using my grandmother as a bargaining chip my entire adult life. I knew that. I also knew she was 82 years old and about to go under anesthesia. I RSVP'd yes. Not for him, for her. What I didn't tell him was that I had already been building something for 14 months that he didn't know existed yet, and that the wedding he was using as a condition was about to become the most publicly inconvenient evening of his life. I am an investigative journalist at the Nashville Register. I have been there 7 years. Before that, 2 years at a smaller paper in Murfreesboro, where I learned to write fast and accurately under pressure. Before that, 3 simultaneous jobs and a journalism degree at Vanderbilt on a need-based scholarship I applied for, filled out and earned entirely by myself. Nobody in my family knew any of this. Not the degree, not the awards, not the front-page stories, not the investigation I had spent the last 14 months quietly building that was currently in legal review and had already attracted interest from 2 national outlets. This was not an accident. The one time I had tried to share something, a regional press award at 27 for an accountability story on a school district, Melissa had listened for 40 seconds and redirected to a kitchen renovation. Patrice sent a card with a gift card to a restaurant that had been closed for 2 years. Gerald said nothing. After that, I stopped. My work existed where it actually mattered, in published bylines, in citations from other journalists, in the quiet nod from a source who had trusted me with something real. That was enough. I had learned very early not to need approval from people who had already decided before I opened my mouth what my words were worth. The investigation that changed everything had started 14 months before the wedding invitation arrived, and it had nothing to do with my family, at least not at first. I had been following a thread in Franklin County's commercial development records, permit applications that didn't match the land surveys filed alongside them, parcels listed in development proposals that didn't appear to be fully consolidated under the developer's ownership, the kind of discrepancy that hides in plain sight because real estate documents are dense and tedious, and that is precisely why the people who need them to go unnoticed make them that way on purpose. One company name kept appearing across the documents, Callahan Development Group. I want to be very clear about this. I did not start that investigation because of my father. I started it because numbers that don't match are the only real invitation I ever need. And I had been following the thread for 14 months before I understood which company it led back to. By the time I did, I had too much documented to stop. What I found after 14 months of records requests and a very long conversation with a county land recorder who was 6 months from retirement and had run out of reasons to protect powerful people from their own paperwork was this. Gerald Callahan had been representing to his development partners and to the Whitfield Heritage Foundation, which was co-funding the entire Oakdale project, that every parcel of land required for the build was fully consolidated under Callahan Development Group. The center parcel, 4 acres, rolling grass, a creek, an oak tree older than anyone alive, was not consolidated. It was not his. It had been legally signed over to me by my grandmother when I was 16 years old. I had never signed it back. My name was still on the deed, clear and unambiguous, in a county records office that anyone with a computer and a records request could access. I had a copy of that deed in my apartment. I had been sitting on the full story for 3 weeks, waiting for legal review when the wedding invitation arrived. The morning after Gerald's phone call, I drove into the office, pulled up every document I had, made a second copy of everything, and folded the deed copy into the inside pocket of my jacket. Then I called my colleague Marcus Webb, not a journalist but an audio-visual technician who had helped us build our video production suite and who owed me a considerable favor after a city council meeting incident that I had declined to write about. "Marcus," I said, "I need you to come to a wedding with me in Franklin." He said he needed more information. I gave it to him, all of it. By the end of that phone call, Marcus had already found the opening. The Whitfield Estate Reception had contracted a local AV company, short-staffed for the event, who had posted a same-week freelance opening online. He sent his resume before we finished talking. The callback came before I poured my second cup of coffee. 2 weeks before the wedding, Gerald arranged the family dinner that was his precondition for my access to the care facility, which was itself the precondition for seeing my grandmother, which was itself the only reason I had agreed to any of this. The drive from Nashville to Franklin takes just under an hour. I spent the last 5 minutes sitting in the driveway of my childhood home, reminding myself that I was a 32-year-old woman who had slept in her car for 11 days at 17 and assembled an entire life out of nothing, and that I could certainly get through 2 hours of dinner without losing my grip on anything important. The house looked exactly as it always had. White columns, manicured lawn, American flag by the front door. The whole performance of respectability maintained to the last precisely trimmed hedge. My mother noted within 30 seconds of my arrival that I looked tired, which in Patrice Callahan's vocabulary was never a question about sleep and always a statement about appearance and what it communicated to people who mattered. My father asked what I was doing with myself in the specific way of a man who expects the answer to confirm what he already thinks, and when I said the Nashville Register, he nodded in the slow, unfocused way that means the information is already being filed away in a drawer he will never open. Melissa arrived late, the way Melissa had arrived to things her entire life, because arriving late to a room that is already full of people waiting for you is a form of power she had identified early and used consistently. She positioned her engagement ring under the dining room light at intervals throughout the appetizer course, like a jeweler demonstrating merchandise. She pulled me aside in the hallway before we sat down to tell me she needed me to wear something understated at the wedding, that Brandon's family had very particular aesthetic sensibilities, and then asked with the specific tilt of her head she'd been using to deliver small cruelties since childhood, whether I was still alone, whether there was anyone in my life at all. I said nothing. She smiled the way she smiled when silence confirmed what she had already decided. Before I left, Patrice handed me a garment bag. Inside, a dress she had selected for the occasion. Pale beige, shapeless, 2 sizes too large. She said it would be perfect. In context, perfect meant invisible, which was of course the entire purpose. I thanked her, put it in my car, and drove back toward the highway. The name hit me somewhere around the 2nd-mile marker. Whitfield. I knew that name, not from Melissa's ring or Gerald's careful mentions of Brandon's family over dinner. I knew it from a folder on my desktop labeled Oakdale. Foundation partners. The Whitfield Heritage Foundation had been one of 2 co-funders of Gerald's Oakdale development project. The foundation chair, the woman who had signed the partnership agreement, reviewed the land consolidation documents Gerald had submitted, and authorized the funding, was a woman named Eleanor Whitfield, Brandon's mother. I had been corresponding with Eleanor Whitfield for 6 months as part of my document research under my professional byline in my capacity as an investigative journalist. We had exchanged dozens of emails. She knew my work. She knew my professional name. She did not know my face, had never seen a photograph of me, and had no reason to connect T.N. Callahan, staff journalist to the Callahan family of Franklin, whose development project she had funded. I sat in my car in a gas station parking lot outside Franklin and held that information for a long moment. I was not going to use it as a weapon. I was not my father. I did not build things by tearing other people's down. But I filed it in the part of my brain that stores things you don't know what to do with yet, drove back to Nashville, and called my editor. I told her the legal review needed to move faster. That weekend, Marcus and I sat at my kitchen table and built the presentation together. 5 slides. Clean, factual, nothing inflammatory. My graduation photograph. Alone, grinning, diploma in both hands, the caption reading that nobody came but I went anyway. My press credential. A photograph from a job site visit. Working clothes, notebook in hand. The front page of the Nashville Register with my byline above the fold on the county official story. And a final text slide. White letters on a dark background. That said simply, "You called me a dropout. I have a degree. You called me broke. I own my apartment. You called me a failure. I have a career that outlasted every story you told about me." Marcus looked at the slides for a long time. Then he saved the file to a USB drive, put it in his jacket pocket, and said it was the cleanest counter-argument he had ever seen assembled. The trigger was a single text, 1 word, begin. If their slideshow turned out to be harmless, a genuine family toast, real photographs, something decent, I would never send it. I would sit at whatever table they assigned me, eat whatever they served, and drive back to Nashville with my grandmother's visit arranged and nothing else accomplished. I gave them that chance, deliberately. I want you to know that. One last chance, freely offered, to be decent. The wedding morning was clear and cold, the particular October light in Tennessee that makes everything look slightly more significant than it actually is, which on this specific morning felt appropriate. The ceremony was held at a pale stone church in Franklin that had been standing long enough for the town to stop seeing it and simply assume it as part of the permanent landscape. 200 guests filled the pews. Franklin's business community, country club members, people whose names appeared in the local paper's business section, regularly enough to feel like furniture. In the front row, the Whitfield family. Eleanor in a deep green jacket, silver hair pinned back, the posture of a woman who had made a great many decisions in her life and was comfortable with all of them. Her husband Richard beside her, distinguished and reserved. Brandon at the altar looking genuinely uncomplicated, happy. I sat in the last pew. Nobody greeted me. Nobody moved to make room. Gerald worked the center aisle before the ceremony began like a man running for office. Handshakes, shoulder claps, the warm laugh deployed at precise intervals. Patrice moved near the front in a dress that had clearly cost more than my monthly car payment, and at one point I caught, from 6 rows back, her telling a friend that both her daughters were present today, even the difficult one, followed by a light laugh that was designed to signal that the difficult one was a manageable inconvenience rather than a genuine source of pain. After 32 years of being the subject of low-voiced conversations, I had developed the ability to hear my name from remarkable distances. Melissa cried during her vows. I believe they were real tears. Whatever else was true about my sister, she loved Brandon Whitfield, and I sat in the last pew and felt, unexpectedly, a brief and genuine tenderness for the girl she must have been before she learned that other people's diminishment was a useful tool. It didn't last long, but it was there. The reception at Whitfield Estate was everything. A reception at a place called Whitfield Estate was always going to be. Crystal chandeliers, round tables in white linen, gardenias and candlelight, and that particular scent of money that isn't cologne or perfume, but something underneath both, the smell of rooms that are never quite the wrong temperature, and food that is always exactly on time. My table was number 16, back corner, nearest the kitchen entrance. Every time a server pushed through the swinging door behind me, a burst of clattering dishes and shouted orders hit the back of my neck like a small, regular reminder of where I had been placed in the hierarchy of the evening. The beige dress Patrice had selected for me was still on a hanger in my hotel room. I was wearing navy, well-cut, 3 years old, bought entirely by myself. The toasts began midway through the main course. The best man spoke for longer than anyone had asked him to, which is a tradition at weddings so consistent it should probably have its own entry in the program. Then Eleanor Whitfield took the microphone briefly. Warm, precise, genuinely gracious, the words of a woman who means what she says and says only what she means. Then Gerald stood. And here is the thing about Gerald Callahan at a podium. He was genuinely good at it. He told specific, funny, true-sounding stories about Melissa's childhood that made the room lean forward. He made people laugh and then made them feel something just after the laugh, which is the hardest trick in public speaking, and he had been doing it his whole life. At one point, he mentioned, almost in passing, that both his daughters were with him tonight. He looked directly at me when he said it. I nodded once. I gave him nothing else. Then Melissa took the microphone. She was radiant. Funny in the practiced way of someone who has been performing warmth for a very appreciative audience their entire life. She thanked the Whitfields with genuine feeling, thanked her parents, named 4 specific friends in an order that was clearly ranked by social importance, the kind of thing you only notice if you've spent your life paying attention to who gets named and who doesn't. And then, with a small, fond-seeming laugh that was precisely calibrated to sound affectionate while landing as a dismissal, she mentioned her older sister Nora, who had managed to make it today despite everything, which was really something, wasn't it? Polite laughter moved through the room, the kind where people aren't entirely sure but follow the lead of the person who seems most confident. Gerald laughed. The real, unguarded kind. I set my fork down on the table. I looked at the centerpiece, gardenias, candles, trailing green stems, and I breathed in the slow, deliberate way I breathe when I am in the middle of something difficult and I cannot afford to lose my focus. If you have ever been placed at the back of a room on purpose by people who were supposed to love you, not by accident but as a message, I want you to know that I see you and I understand exactly what that feels like. And if this story is reaching something in you right now, please hit like and subscribe. It means more than I can properly explain in 2 sentences. Stay with me. The lights dimmed. The maid of honor took the microphone with the energy of someone who had been looking forward to this particular moment for weeks. She announced a special presentation from the Callahan family. Soft piano music filled the tent, and the screen lit up with baby photographs of Melissa. Gap-toothed smile at 6, ballet recital at 8, prom at 17 in a blue dress, Gerald and Patrice flanking her, all 3 of them beaming in the specific, coordinated way of a family that had practiced looking happy together until it became indistinguishable from the real thing. Family vacation photographs, the beach, a ski trip, a summer lake house, every caption warm, every image carefully chosen, the whole thing built to make 200 people feel good about the family watching it. I was not in a single frame, not one. In 32 years of family photographs, I had been edited out so completely that my absence looked intentional, which of course it was. The room responded warmly, the way rooms respond to well-constructed slideshows. Soft sounds of recognition, small laughs at the childhood images, the collective warmth that piano music and candlelight produce when they work together. Then the couple photographs appeared, Melissa and Brandon at a vineyard and a football game, and a Christmas dinner at the Whitfield estate, and the room applauded at each one with the genuine pleasure of people watching a story go right. Then the music shifted, something playful, slightly theatrical, a drumroll sound effect, just long enough to make everyone look up from their conversations at once. The screen read, "And now, the rest of the Callahan family." Melissa looked at me across the room and gave me a small wave, the kind that is really a signal, the kind that says, "Watch this." I saw Patrice lean back in her chair with the settled expression of a woman waiting for a meal she has personally ordered. Gerald had already turned back to Richard Whitfield at the head table, resuming their conversation, the way a man returns to his real priorities after a minor administrative task has been completed. Under table 16, my phone was already in my hand. The message to Marcus, typed and waiting. 1 word. I made myself a promise in that exact moment. If the next image on that screen was a real photograph, something genuine, something that wasn't designed to draw blood, I would not press send. I would sit through whatever they had prepared, finish my dinner, drive to my hotel, and visit my grandmother in the morning with nothing else on my conscience. I gave them that chance. One last, fully open chance to be decent. The screen changed. My face filled the frame. An old high school photograph, the unflattering kind that exists in every family archive. The kind that most families have the basic decency to leave in a box. Across the bottom, in bold white letters, "High School Dropout." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. The uncertain kind, where people aren't quite sure if they are supposed to be laughing, and some of them do anyway because someone near them already started. The next slide arrived before the laughter had settled. A cracked heart emoji beside my name. Divorced. The laughter found its footing and grew louder, feeding on itself the way crowd laughter does once it crosses a certain threshold. Next, a cartoon wallet, empty, flapping open, broke. Next, a single place setting. 1 chair, 1 plate, a lone candle. Alone. Melissa was laughing at the head table, openly, the way she had laughed at my expense our entire lives. Freely and without apology, because nobody had ever taught her there was any other way to do it. Patrice sipped her wine and watched the room with the measured satisfaction of a director watching her production land exactly as planned. Then the final slide appeared, my medical history, on a 10-foot screen. In a room of 200 people, the word in letters large enough to read from the parking lot. The laughter that followed was the worst kind, the uncomfortable kind, the kind that has already gone too far and knows it, but cannot stop itself, because stopping would require someone to say out loud that it was wrong, and nobody wanted to be the first person to say that. And then Melissa leaned into the microphone with the smile she had been wearing my entire life and said that maybe everyone shouldn't laugh too hard because her sister might actually cry. I looked at the screen for 3 seconds. Then I looked at Eleanor Whitfield. She had set her wine glass on the table, both hands flat on the white linen. Her jaw was set in the precise, controlled way of a woman who has just witnessed something she cannot unconsider and is deciding very carefully what to do about it. My thumb pressed send. Wirt DeMarcus had been standing at that AV booth for 4 hours. He had tested the system during setup that afternoon, had confirmed the USB swap would take under 3 seconds, had locked the utility closet containing the power override with a key that was currently in his front jacket pocket. 3 seconds after I pressed send, Melissa's slideshow disappeared from the 10-foot screen. The room went still in the confused, collective way of 200 people realizing simultaneously that something has shifted but not yet understanding what. The screen lit up again. Dark background, white text, clean and simple as a press release. The real Nora Callahan. The first slide, my graduation photograph. Cap and gown, standing alone in front of the Vanderbilt seal, diploma held in both hands, smiling the specific smile of someone who has just done something entirely by themselves and is completely aware of what that means. The caption read, "Nobody came to my graduation. I went anyway." A woman at a table near the center of the room put her hand over her mouth. Her husband looked at her, then at the screen, then back at her, unsure what expression was appropriate. The next slide, my press credential, my photograph, my name, my publication, staff journalist, Nashville Register, 7 years. The murmurs began, the kind that start at one table and move outward like water finding a level. The next slide, me on a reporting job, notebook in hand, working clothes, standing outside a county building with the expression of someone who has somewhere important to be and the skills to get there. The caption, 4 stories with national pickup. One county official resigned before publication. Gerald was on his feet, his voice cut across the room in the sharp, controlled register he used in board meetings when something was going off plan. He directed it toward the back of the room, toward Marcus. Marcus did not move. The remote had been locked. The utility closet had been locked. For the first time in 15 years, my father could not switch off what I was saying. The next slide, a framed award. Tennessee Press Association, investigative reporting, first place. Gerald moved toward table 16 with the focused, purposeful stride of a man who has spent his entire career being the one who resolves situations. He stopped 2 feet from me. His voice dropped to the private register, but the room was quiet enough that the surrounding tables heard every word. He told me to sit down. He said I was embarrassing myself. He said that if I did not stop this immediately, I would never see my grandmother again. I stood up from table 16. I said that he had used my grandmother as a condition my entire adult life, and that it was finished because I had already contacted the care facility directly and been added to her file as an emergency contact. I could visit her whenever I chose, without his permission, without his conditions, without his voice on the phone with its practiced warmth telling me what was required of me first. The color left his face in the particular way that color leaves a face when a lever a person has been relying on is visibly, permanently removed. The final slide appeared. White letters on a dark background. The words I had typed at my kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night after 3 weeks of sitting on a story that was going to change everything when I finally understood what I actually wanted to say. You called me a dropout. I have a degree. You called me broke. I own my home. You called me a failure. I am still here. I did not go to the microphone. I did not need one. I spoke from exactly where I was standing, in the back corner near the kitchen entrance, at table 16, in my navy dress, in my own voice at the volume appropriate for a room that had gone completely silent. I said I had not dropped out. I had been forced out at 17 years old because I had refused to sign over land my grandmother had given me, land that my father had been representing to his development partners and to the Whitfield Heritage Foundation as fully consolidated under Callahan Development Group for the past 3 years. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and held up the photocopy of the deed. 4 acres. My name on the document, clear and unambiguous, in the county records office, where it had been sitting undisturbed and entirely in my name for the past 15 years. The room did not make a sound. Eleanor Whitfield stood up from the head table. She moved through the room the way certain women move, without hurry, without uncertainty, with the particular authority of someone who does not need to announce herself because rooms reorganize around her presence automatically. She stopped in front of me. She looked at the deed. She looked at the screen. She looked at Gerald. Her voice, when she spoke, was the kind of quiet that travels further than volume. She said that the woman Gerald had put on that screen was the journalist she had contracted to work on the most significant project her foundation had funded in a decade, that she had been corresponding with me for 6 months, had reviewed my professional work, had trusted my judgment on assessments and timelines and community impact, that she had done all of this without knowing that my last name was identical to her son's future father-in-law, or that the land at the center of the Oakdale proposal currently sat in my name and not his, because Gerald had apparently seen no reason to mention either of those details when he submitted his partnership documentation. Gerald tried to explain. He had been explaining his way out of difficult rooms for 60 years, and he began the process with the automatic efficiency of deep habit. He said it was a misunderstanding. He said I had always been prone to drama. He said the land matter was a family issue that could be handled quietly between the people involved. Eleanor Whitfield said there was no Oakdale partnership. 4 words, placed on the table with the finality of a door being closed. Gerald's hand dropped to his side. Whatever he had been about to say next stayed where it was. From the head table, Brandon had been watching the entire exchange. He looked at Melissa with the specific, serious expression of a man whose understanding of a situation has just undergone a fundamental revision. Not angry, not accusatory, but the quiet, careful look of someone who realizes that the version of events he was given and the version that actually occurred are not the same story, and that this difference is significant. Patrice broke first. She had been holding the performance together through 30 years of dinners and board meetings and carefully managed social situations, and she held it together for approximately 90 seconds after Eleanor's 4 words, before the infrastructure failed. What came through wasn't grief or guilt. It was something more exposed and less dignified than either. The raw sound of a woman realizing that the story she had been telling about her family for decades had just been corrected in front of the 200 people whose opinion of that story mattered most to her. She looked at me and said that I thought I was better than them now, that a few slides on a projector screen didn't change anything, that I had been nothing when I walked out of that house and I was nothing now dressed up as something impressive. I looked at my mother, the woman who had sat at a kitchen table turning magazine pages while my father told me to leave, the woman who had handed me a shapeless beige dress and told me to blend into the walls at her daughter's wedding. I said that I had been nothing because she had made sure of it, and that there was a meaningful difference between protecting your family and protecting the story you wanted people to tell about your family. I had spent a long time learning that difference. It turned out to be the most important education I ever received. An older woman in a floral dress and reading glasses on a silver chain stood up from a table near the back. She had the quiet authority that accumulates in certain people over time, not from money or standing, but from decades of simply telling the truth in rooms where lying would have been easier. She said she had known Ruth Callahan for 50 years. She said Ruth would have been proud of what she had just witnessed in this room. She picked up her clutch and walked toward the exit, her heels making a clean, steady sound on the hardwood floor that somehow carried further than anything else that had been said all evening. Another couple stood, then a man near the window. They didn't make speeches. They simply left, the way decent people leave rooms where something indecent has occurred and staying begins to feel like endorsement. Melissa sat alone at the head table, her wedding dress still perfect, her hair still pinned, the reception she had spent 8 months planning emptying around her. Brandon stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, looking at her with the expression of a man who is conducting a serious, internal audit of a decision he recently made, not cruelly, just honestly. He was a genuinely good person, Brandon Whitfield. That had always been apparent, even from the last pew. Gerald stood in the center of the room with his hands at his sides and watched his business partnership dissolve and his social standing recalibrate in real time. And for the first time in all the years I had known him, he looked exactly like what he had always been underneath the columns and the manicured lawn and the American flag by the front door. A man who had built everything on top of a story that wasn't entirely true. Watching the story come to its end in public, in front of people he had spent his career impressing. I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair at table 16. I straightened it. I was wearing my own clothes. I had come here in my own clothes, and I was leaving in them. I did not go to the microphone. Everything that needed saying had been said from exactly where I was standing, and the room had heard all of it. I told Melissa, clearly enough for the surrounding tables to hear, that I had not come to ruin her wedding. I had come because our grandmother asked me to. I looked at Gerald. I said that if any of them found a way eventually to offer something that looked like genuine respect, not conditions, not performances, not a seat by the kitchen door, and a dress meant to make me disappear, they knew where to find me. Then I walked to the exit. At the coat check near the front door, Eleanor Whitfield was already there, green jacket on, car keys in hand. She looked at me with the direct, uncomplicated expression of a woman who has just revised her understanding of a situation and made her decisions accordingly. Monday morning, she said. Her office. We had a project to finish. I said I would be there. I walked out into the October night. The air was cold and clean and smelled like leaves and wood smoke, the specific combination that means autumn in Tennessee has fully arrived and is not apologizing for it. I sat in my car in the Whitfield Estate parking lot with both hands on the steering wheel and let the evening settle. Marcus appeared at my passenger window 5 minutes later, still in his AV company polo, holding 2 gas station coffees. He got in without being asked, handed me one, and we sat together watching the last of the guests drift out of the building. My phone lit up with a message from Dee, my grandmother's nurse at the care facility. Ruth had watched the entire reception through a family member's live stream. She had seen everything. She was laughing, Dee said, and had made the nurse replay the moment Eleanor spoke 3 times in a row. She had said through the laughing, "That's my girl." A second message, from Eleanor Whitfield's personal number. Her foundation's legal team had already been notified about the land situation. Gerald Callahan would not be building on my property. She would find another partner for future Oakdale development. The message was 3 sentences, precise and final, the written equivalent of her voice. I typed back 2 words to Eleanor. I typed 3 words to the nurse to pass along to my grandmother. I did not respond to Gerald or Patrice or Melissa. Everything that needed to be said between us had been said in a room full of gardenias and chandeliers and 200 witnesses, and it had been said clearly enough that no follow-up was required. Marcus started the car. "Where to?" he asked. "Hotel tonight," I said. "Home tomorrow. Back to work by Monday." He pulled out of the parking lot, and I watched the Whitfield estate lights shrink in the side mirror, the chandelier still glowing behind the tall windows, the whole beautiful, expensive performance of a family that had never quite been what it looked like from the outside, still visible for a moment and then gone around a curve in the road. I had a story to file and a project to present, and a grandmother to visit on a Tuesday afternoon with no time limit and no conditions, and nobody in the hallway checking their phone while the clock ran out. My grandmother had given me 4 acres of land and told me not to let anyone take what was mine. It turned out she wasn't just talking about the land. Some things, once they are truly yours, cannot be taken. Not the work, not the truth, not the version of yourself you built in the years when nobody was watching and nobody was applauding, and you had to decide all by yourself whether it was worth continuing to build. It always was. Every single day, it was worth it. The people who tried to make you nothing can only succeed if you accept their definition of the word. I decided a long time ago that I would be the one writing those definitions. That is the only revenge that actually lasts.